the origin of this. How did it start? What do you got?
Really, these conversations between the Seahawks and Broncos had been going on for weeks, and it heated up last week at the scouting combine when George Paton and John Schneider met face-to-face and really began to talk about the compensation. It was really about the Seahawks, for everything they had said publicly that they had no plans to trade Russell. That really meant behind the scenes they were only going to trade him if it was a transformational type of deal. They were absolutely prepared to move forward with Russell Wilson as their quarterback in 2022. They did not get that, but the Broncos stepped up. And when you look at the compensation, 2 number ones, including the number 9 overall pick, 2 second-rounders, and 3 players, including a quarterback who's still young, that the Seahawks liked coming out in the draft, a tight end in Noah Fant who's pretty good, and a guy in Shelby Harris who's got a reasonable deal and is a pretty good veteran defensive player. It made sense, and it also sets up Seattle now to have the collateral here to go and make potentially another move to go get their next quarterback.
So what about the idea that the Washington Commanders were going YOLO and might still be all over the league right now for somebody like Russell Wilson's caliber and made a better deal or offered a richer deal? Maybe they don't have the players to come back. What can you tell me about the idea of maybe Denver being in the AFC? Russell wanted them. What about that? Anything on that front?
It had a lot to do with where Russell Wilson wanted to go. He had a no-trade clause, and there's a unique relationship between Russell Wilson and the Seahawks where, throughout the course of this offseason, he and Pete Carroll had a lot of conversations. They were very open, and Russell would talk about different places he might like to go play. It's unusual, to say the least, that you have that type of a relationship, but on the short list of teams that he wanted to go to was Denver. And so my understanding was, especially in the last few days here, as this became very real, Russell was very excited about the idea of going to the Broncos, being able to play with some really good young talent, and really being able to get kind of a reboot on his career here. So once the compensation matched up, it moved pretty swiftly. Regardless of what any other team might have offered, Russell Wilson needed to be all in on going to that place, and Denver checked a lot of the boxes that he was looking for.
So why does this have to happen? What happened here? What happened to this relationship, Tom?
I think that sometimes people can reduce things to only one factor. I think that all of us who live here on planet Earth know that interpersonal relationships are inherently complicated, and that was certainly the case with Russell Wilson. There had been so much transition when you talk about, the fact that I believe Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner were the only 2 players left from the Super Bowl winning team. That's the nature of the NFL. Things had evolved. Russell Wilson still did have a supporting cast there. I mean, there's plenty of quarterbacks out there who would go, if this guy doesn't want to play with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and Chris Carson when he's healthy and, all those types of things. I'd go in there. I'd play with those guys. But for us, it was more complicated than that. He's always envisioned himself as somebody who is one of the greats and wants to be a Hall of Famer, and he wants to win Super Bowls, and he wants to win the MVP, and he's never even gotten an MVP vote. And you see how many different things the Seahawks did over the course of time to try to give Russell what he wanted, whether it was, making deals, and Wilson would regularly talk to the front office. Every star player who became available, he wanted to bring those guys in. He had one of the most aggressive GMs in John Schneider, who was always trying to add those missing pieces to the roster. But it's also a matter of, they were going to be a defense-first, run-first type of team for a long time under Pete Carroll. He got up to that hot start in 2020 where they were throwing the ball a lot more. Then he went through a tough stretch. Defense has changed a little bit how they were playing the Seahawks. Pete wanted to get back to running, so they weren't turning the ball over so much. And those MVP hopes and all that talk kind of went away. And that's not to say that he's got an agreement now that Nathaniel Hackett's going to have him throw the ball 60 times a game. I don't think that's going to be it at all. But it's an opportunity right now for him to go to the next thing. And for the Seahawks, there has to be some level of fatigue knowing that you went through all this last offseason, all the speculation and all the questions, and now this offseason, the same thing was happening. This would never end. It would continue into the future. And so once you get the type of package that John Schneider and Pete Carroll thought would help the team, not just now, but in the big picture, it made a lot of sense for them to say this is the right time to reboot, even though you've got a 70-year-old coach in Pete Carroll who has no interest in rebuilding. Again, they've got a lot more assets now, and I expect that they're going to be aggressive to add pieces to their team and try to win in 2022.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.